the core of our life needs to be the pursuit of connection with everything.
Hello, and welcome to Spiritually Hungry.
Hello.
I'm actually hungry. Did you bring me snacks?
I'm actually not hungry.
Did you bring me any snacks?
I'm just spiritually hungry. I can go get you some snacks if you want.
Snacks. Alrighty, so to our listeners, do you remember the first time you felt connected to something larger than yourself? Actually, do you remember the first time?
I'm trying to remember.
Little cutie, you came into the world like that.
I mean, it's definitely been progressively more, and I can probably point to different times in my adolescence into adulthood. But as maybe most importantly for our listeners, it's hopefully a never-ending process of growth.
You really don't have like one profound memory. Like
I've had many
your
profound.
First though.
No, I have many different firsts. Like the first time I was inspired by this, or the first time this idea inspired me, or the first time this experience inspired me. So I have a lot of firsts, but not the first ever. Because I think again, because I do remember even as a child, which we've spoken about before, we all have a deep spiritual knowing as children. Mm-hmm. It's whether we lose it and or help it grow as we come into adulthood.
And if it's supported in the environment that we're in.
Do you remember your first?
I do.
Yeah. What was it?
It's interesting because it wasn't so much of like a powerful like aha. It was more of a knowing, a deep knowing. So I just remember when I was 4 that I was having tea parties with God, and I really remember like setting it up and how we both liked it, and we took our tea a different way. And I remember that.
How did God like his tea?
God liked it black. I liked mine with sugar, and I remember the picture I had in my mind was like a king in the deck of cards, and that was kind of like a vision I had. And I realized that, oh wow, you're playing with God. Like I realized it was a moment where I kind of knew that was different, but also powerful.
Nice.
And I just remember feeling really happy and secure and safe. And then I think that was a touch point for me later in life whenever I felt that and that's what today's episode really is. We go through stages in life where our connection wanes, and sometimes it's stronger and sometimes it's weaker. Sometimes it's forgotten. And it depends on moments and stages in our life. But I would go back to that initial memory as a point of reference, to how it felt. So back to our listeners, for you guys, it might have come in a quiet moment or maybe in the middle of chaos, but something opened, the lights turned on. And after living in years of darkness, there was that moment of clarity. Everything sharpened, thoughts, emotions, a sense of purpose. And you were able to see through a different lens or peel back the layers of your life and look at it in a deeper, more evolved way. It's all of those moments where you can really see that you were in one state and now you're in a more elevated state, irregardless of the situation. But, and that's what today is about, maybe lately you feel like you're wandering through a spiritual desert. Practices feel dry and dull and mechanical, because I think that is what happens, right? When we have that first initial taste of connection, of connecting to our source, really is connecting to our inner essence and soul, we feel really inspired. We feel really excited. We have the energy and the desire to do the work and to be a better person and a giving person and a sharing person. But then what happens in those moments where you don't even feel?
Well, I think it's important to understand that it's human nature in all things, physical, but also spiritual, right? What we call the hedonic treadmill, right? That yes, there's that momentary, and momentary could be for a week, a month, a year, of elevated excitement and understanding, but then everything goes down to a baseline. And if you're not careful, you can stay in that baseline or you can grow below it. I would say probably most scared we should be if we're even developing more, but just not to the extent that we're meant to be developing. And I think for me, and I do see this very strongly as the most important task of our lifetime, and that is to be deeply growing in our connection to what we call the light of the Creator, and we can also refer to it as our soul. And if that's not an intense both pursuit and accomplishment, then we're actually not accomplishing what we came to this world to accomplish. And I've been thinking about this a lot lately, and I've been speaking about this a lot lately, is that, we live in a world where spiritual, quote unquote, wisdom or information, I would say wisdom for me is a real deep thing, but spiritual information is both taught by so many people, and there's just so much information out there.
I don't even know if it's fully taught. I think it's touched
given,
upon it. Yeah. And I think there is a big differentiation.
And for me, and I have to say, I was going to be harsh. I was saying, I know, well, personally, I'm not interested. And also in my work with people, I'm not interested on that basic surface
no, you're
level.
Not interested at all.
It can be important as a support, but the core has to be the core. And what's the core? The core is, and I suggest this to our listeners, is your pursuit of connection with the endless light of the Creator, however you refer to it, whether it's God, whether it's the Creator. The core of our life needs to be the pursuit of connection with everything. And everything means that light that permeates and surrounds us, and the deepening and ever deepening connection to the light of our soul.
So you said a few things that I want to kind of
unpack
and go back to explore it. So I want to talk about the difference between knowledge and wisdom. But before that, I think that we will all, as you said, find ourselves in different points of connection. And sometimes they'll feel greater and sometimes they won't. But the whole thing here in the starting point is it doesn't really matter how you feel. I think spiritually speaking, and I think we're very aligned here. And we're fortunate enough that this was always our kind of point of connection, even initially, was that we're in it to win it. It's not just a study to make you be a better person or a kinder person or to make you feel better. It's that we want to complete what we came to this world to do, which means the pursuit of a spiritual existence and the constant growing in that is the goal, right?
And I think it's a really important point. It has a very clear goal.
Correct. So the point is that it doesn't matter if you find yourself in a spiritual desert. It doesn't even matter if you feel inspired in the moment. If you know that this is where you need to get from A to point B in a lifetime, there are no days off. There's no complacency, which I'm going to unpack all of these. There's no just staying stuck. It doesn't matter how you feel because you're clear on what the end goal is.
Absolutely.
And I'm not sure that many approach spirituality in that way.
Yeah. I unfortunately, I'm scared that there's this lack of clarity around this one point. And if I can, 2 points of inspiration about this. Not to be dark, right? But currently in our world, death is a reality, right? That means that, unfortunately,
and not just that, it's more and more prevalent.
No, I just meant at the end, right? Even at 120 years.
That's okay.
Yeah, but the point is, and this might be, again, I hope I explain this well. The consciousness with which most people live, even if they're quote unquote spiritual, is a different consciousness than where the soul has to go when it leaves this body. Right. So, and tell me if this is too much, but right, this what I would call body consciousness and soul consciousness. Right. Okay. So body consciousness is the day to day. I love my job. I love my food. I love my family to some extent.
And then we take that very seriously in and of itself.
Well, and a lot of it is serious. I mean, it's varying degrees of serious, but the most serious is, where is my soul in relation to its connection to its source? And when the time comes for the soul to leave the body, the only thing that will be important as to whether that process is painful or joyful, easy or difficult,
and how long that lasts, that
process. And that's a whole other podcast we should do, but is how...
Let's do that. That's very interesting.
Deeply intertwined and connected, I have brought my soul to be with its source while I was in this physical body.
Which is the goal.
And the purpose of spiritual
And say that again,
pursuit.
because I think that's so, you said it so beautifully. And I don't think
thank
people, if you can think of that one sentence every day, I'm pretty sure all of our days are going to look differently.
Absolutely.
Say it again.
Well, I can't repeat exact words. Our listeners can rewind, but
how closely do we bring our soul?
Right. The only thing that really matters, and the only thing that will matter at the end, is how deeply connected we have brought our soul to be with its source
while it's in its body. And that's the key, because soul is always connected to source when it's not in body.
Right.
When it's in body, that's the whole purpose, is to pursue a life that's going to connect you in that way while living with the distractions and the calls of the physical reality.
Right. And we have to be so careful. Again, I don't want to call it a corruption, but of the thought that, what's really important is whether I'm happy in my body's happy. And yes, I will use spiritual pursuit and or information to make my body happy. Mm-hmm. Not singularly focused, or at least generally focused on, no. My real purpose, why my soul resides within this body for however long I am here, is to attach it to its source, to connect it to its source. And that's the purpose of spiritual pursuit, and that's the purpose of life. So, and I think sometimes it's often, if you think about, when the soul leaves the body, well, then clearly how the body feels at that point doesn't matter one ounce, one drop. And
actually, it very quickly is discarded. The body very, very, very quickly, with all that energy you put into it. Once the soul leaves it, that's it.
Right. So that's one. I hope for our listeners, that's a point of inspiration to really ask the question and focus our spiritual pursuit in such a way that is really, do I feel more connected to my source today? Am I connecting to my soul and its light and its purpose more today than yesterday?
So the first tip that I would give to support that is to check with ourselves that we're clear day to day that the purpose of spirituality isn't to live in our heads, which then really caters to body desire, and it's also not simply just be more enlightened, but the work is the transformation, that it's real, that it's tangible and lived. So I often see this, I'm sure you do too, that people replace thought for action. And they think that by thinking about spiritual ideas or thinking about things, they're actually making headway. Headway. That they're making headway. So
segue to headway.
Segue to headway. So, and I see this a lot, right? Like, we can think about spiritual ideas. We can even talk about them. We can discuss it on and on and on. And then you think, wow, I spend so much time thinking about this idea and talking about it. I am actually becoming a more spiritual person, or I'm changing. I'm working on myself simply by thinking about it. But it's not. It has to move out of head into heart, which then leads through action.
And you said something really important, which I, again, want to underscore. Transformation. A question for our listeners and a question to the spiritual world out there. Again, change, transformation. Is that for the purpose of making the body feel better? Or is it seen as a goal? So when I wake up in the morning, I know that the version of me, and I'm pretty happy with who I am. I'm a nice person, spiritual person. But I know that whatever version of me I woke up today needs to be a different version, a better version tonight before I go to sleep, and this week, this month. And not because then I'll be happier, although I will be happier if this is my goal, and not because I'll feel better, but actually because I actually have a task, and that is the task. So, because again, going back to where I think too often people fall, even those who are listening, living a spiritual life, is that change or transformation is for the purpose of the body. No, it's actually for the purpose of the soul. Mm-hmm. Meaning, so I have anger issues and I realize it's ruining my relationships. So I'll use the spiritual wisdom to change the anger issue. You should. Beautiful. But that's actually, that's part of the goal. So now that you're not an angry person, so now you can sit down on your plateau. No, now you have to go deeper. What is the next thing you need to change? And if change and transformation is not a goal unto its own, which means I need to be, because I can and I need to be growing all the time, but rather it is the pain points in my life that I'm trying to fix and change for, that's another, again, misunderstanding of the purpose of spiritual work. By the way, it also won't lead to happiness. It also won't solve the problems. But most importantly, it's missing the purpose.
So what's interesting is we're saying that it's not meant to change the body, but the soul. So the soul is perfect. It's this transformation occurs when we start peeling back what's covering the soul and allowing it to be fully revealed. Are you saying that soul?
No. So that's an important point, right? I mean, and it's a little.
Yeah, but I think it's important because I don't think it's clear.
Yeah. So like you said, our soul is perfect and powerful. But in previous incarnations or in this incarnation, we have done things to build shells around it. Shells, what we call in Kabbalistic terms, klipot. So the reason why our soul is not shining as powerfully as it can be is because of these layers and layers that we put upon it. We never damage our soul. Our soul is always in its perfected form. The spiritual work is to remove those shells so that the soul can shine. The body, when we call body consciousness, which is more what we call selfishness, ego, desire to receive for the self alone, that either adds layers or does not allow for the removal of layers of light from within our soul.
Right. But the soul is exactly. That's what we're saying. Yes. Yeah. So you had said before about knowledge, and I think that knowledge is gathering a lot of information. I think wisdom is what you earn by living the information.
Also,
and I think that, for instance, you might learn a lot about why forgiveness is important and why it's necessary even, but then to take the action to actually forgive somebody is something else. That's really living the wisdom. It's the same thing if you meditate to be compassionate, but it's not the same as practicing that with a store clerk or with your partner or with your coworker, right? So I think, and then when you start doing that more and more, I think being wise is really once you start peeling back those layers, which can only happen when you put everything into action.
Absolutely. I think that's a very important point, right? That wisdom is
the practicing
that which inspires you to change and to do. Information is not that. And it reminded me of that famous joke that's told about the guy who goes to God and he begs him, to win the lottery, right? And he's begging him, he begs him for days, weeks, months, years, and he never wins the lottery. And after like years, he's frustrated with God, God doesn't hear him. And then so finally, I know there's different versions of this joke, but basically at the end, God says to him, he says to God, what, all these years I've been begging you to win the lottery. I haven't won it once, not even a small lottery, and I believed in you and so on and so forth. Why didn't I win the lottery? So God turns to the man and says, why don't you buy a ticket? Right, that's the point. The point is, he's doing everything. He's praying, whatever it is that he's doing, but he just, the one practical step, the action is not being done.
Exactly. So for our listeners, I think it's important to have self-reflection here and ask yourself these questions just to check your state, right? It's really clear whether you're gathering information or living wisdom. What is it that you're avoiding? What's the point of pain or hurt or desire or love that you're not facing? What scares you? What inspires you? And what actions are you taking to break through these things? Because we're all clear about what breakthroughs we need. Very often it's too painful to touch, or we're not inspired enough. Again, we're not feeling enough, so we leave it aside. But if you ask yourself these very specific questions, you're going to be forced then, if you really want to grow and transform spiritually, to take action.
And once again, Monica, again, a really important point, which it's based on a very important Kabbalistic teaching, that is that there is, and I think we spoke about this maybe in previous podcasts, that there are two forces in this world. There's the force that we call the light of the Creator that is pushing me forward. But there's also this force that is meant to be a headwind, a force that is pushing me not to grow, not to change. And the Kabbalists teach that force will allow you to be a spiritual person, will allow you to go to a spiritual seminar, will allow you to gain spiritual information. And even do things, even do actions of sharing, even do positive spiritual actions. But it will do its most to stop you from that one thing that you actually came to this world to do. So imagine, again, just using the example, a person has, a person is on a spiritual path. So he decides, okay, I'm going to do actions of sharing. But there's one person, maybe it's his, there's one person who he hates, right? He's never, this one person I will never share with. I'll share with 99 other people, but not this one person. Again, but then what the Kabbalah teaches is it's possible that your soul came into this world only to share with that person. So while you're doing the spiritual, whether consciously or unconsciously, you're doing the spiritual calculation, that I'm a good person, I'm a spiritual person, I'm pursuing the spiritual transformation Monica and Michael are talking about on this episode because I'm giving to 99 people, but I'm going to avoid this one person. And
I see it all the time. We talked about this recently, where this one person
between us or on the podcast?
this one person between us that is horrendous to me. And people, like one person it's funny. So I was talking to about this one person. She's like, it's so funny. Everybody says that person's so nice, but I saw it with my own eyes. I saw what she did. I saw what she's capable of. And it's interesting because in that person's mind, she's a spiritual person, studying, doing, acting. But if you can act in hatred and anger and desire to hurt somebody, and you actively pursue that, or even just think it, then you have to question, where are you really, spiritually speaking? Where are you really? You can't deny that. And that's the other gauge here. We can go again, and that's why spirituality is dangerous. It's dangerous because now you're loaded with information and you have a better story to tell yourself while it's okay to behave badly in certain situations to certain people. And because you have now like a lot of content to justify why that's okay, all in the name of spirituality.
That's where the ancient sages would say that spiritual wisdom or information can be a potion of life or a potion of death, where it's possible that the spiritual pursuit actually leads a person to be completely unspiritual. And maybe most importantly, to avoid, like you said before, and to not do or work on the one thing that scares them, that they want to avoid.
But they don't even see it.
Yeah, or maybe more deeply than that. Sometimes they don't see it, but sometimes it's. But I'm all this other stuff is doing. I'm doing really well here. So what? 1%? Yeah, I'll be judged. Whatever. So that I'm failing because no.
Maybe that's why you came back, just for that one.
Actually,
thing.
not maybe. I would say most probably the one area, the one thing, the one
just
aspect
can't get over, get past,
scares you,
understand,
or that exactly. That's
biggest hurt, source of pain is the one thing. Yeah, is the reason. Okay, the second reason I believe that we get spiritually stuck, it's easy to get distracted. And I think this is related to that body consciousness and being in that. Life is noisy. We have work obligations. We have family commitments. We have social commitments. We have endless notifications on our phone. I thought this was really interesting when I read it. So Daniel Levitin, he's a neuroscientist and author of The Organized Mind. Did you read that book? Said most people consume 5 times as much information as we would have 25 years ago. That's a lot. And
unfortunately, it's probably not such great information.
No, it just distracts us. That's my point. He estimates that the average person processes more than 100,000 words each day. Again, and which words are they? Where is our consciousness being pulled to and taken? I mean, we talked about the negative side and how we'll be busy doing a lot of great things, but this is how the negative side gets us. Like, okay, you can do some great things here and that's really important, but I'm going to take 95% of your other time and put you here and get you stuck in the mud. In 2016 essay in the New York Magazine, Andrew Sullivan said, he wrote an article called "I Used to Be a Human Being." Do you remember this?
I do. I think I read it.
I was inspired then. I'm still inspired.
I think I might have even spoken about one of our podcasts years ago.
Perhaps, because this is from 2016. Yeah. Every minute I was engrossed in a virtual interaction. I was not involved in a human encounter. Every second absorbed in some trivia was a second less for any form of reflection, calm, or spirituality. And he goes on to posit that the greatest threat to faith today is not hedonism, but distraction.
Yeah.
It's really interesting.
Completely agree. And I would add to that spiritual distraction as well.
Yeah, because I think also when we're distracted with our own anger even, right, or grief or fear, we have 2 choices. Either we are drawn to be more connected to the creator, to our source, or we get disconnected and we blame the creator and our source. And you can see it both ways. But again, that's a choice to make.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So assuming that we view the work as we spoke about it before, that allowing my soul to shine, connecting my soul to its source as the most important thing, that means that I am delving more deeply into myself all the time. And if I'm delving into myself more deeply all the time, I am discovering more things that I need to change. And I often like to say, if too long has gone by when you haven't had an oh my God moment, which is, oh my God, I thought I was doing this so well, but I realized there's this whole area that that I haven't been pushing myself towards, or whatever that means for you. Or I thought I was treating my children well, but I realize, how little time I've been giving them. And I think one of your great gifts is, as it comes to relationships, but in general with people, you get them to that oh my God moment. But I think for our listeners,
they're rather quickly, because I'm very impatient. But when you were saying that, so those moments, right? I want you to answer how to get there, but you said something a little bit earlier of, how did you start it? Because I don't know if people can automatically, but how did you start it?
No, I think an important question to ask yourself, because some people, as we said before, might be on a spiritual plateau without even knowing it, right? Mm-hmm. Because they're still, quote unquote, doing certain things or behaving in certain ways. But the question is, when was the last time you had an oh my God moment?
So this was my third point, getting out of complacency, basically. The routine, the humdrum, not even paying attention and kind of going robotically
But
through.
I know for me, this is a very clear indicator. When was the last time you were like, oh my God.
You had an epiphany of sorts. And not just you're saying spiritual, but in your life as you exist, whether it's in a relationship or as a mother, as a father, as a coworker, something where you're like, oh my God, what did I just do that?
Exactly.
Who was that?
Exactly.
Yeah, I try to have those
or again, I take us on this even to the more spiritual, which is that
or you understand something more deeply than you understood.
Or I thought I was doing this in the right way, but I was missed. There's so much more that I need to do. So,
by the way, that's the most profound of all. When you actually think you're doing it right, and then suddenly you get like a window, and you're like, whoa, what's really happening here?
And by the way, and I think for me, this is not a negative view, but this is a very important positive view. One of I've mentioned this before, but one of my favorite words in Kabbalah, in this ancient wisdom, is that when we speak about the light of the Creator, we refer to it as the endless, the Ein Sof. And what that means is that the light is endless. It also means that our soul is endless. And that is the view of yourself. So I could be and hopefully I am, and we're both amazing people right now. Every one of our listeners is an amazing,
I thank you.
is an amazing person right now. But what's the end? The end is endless, right? So that means that a deepening awareness of myself necessitates necessarily things I need to change, things I need to grow. Oh my God, moments. And it's not, oh my God, those moments aren't negative. Oh, I've been blind, but rather, no, now I can see more, right? So for example, and I think it's really important because rather than being a depressing thought, oh my God, actually having an oh my God moment of how did I do that? Or why would I do that? Or why didn't I do that? Is actually an indication of growth, not of regression.
Exactly. Where that's how most people misunderstand it.
Exactly. The Kabbalists use an example. They use a parable that if you have a candle and you're sitting in a dark room, oh my God, the candle is so bright. Then you take your candle and you walk outside to the sun, it's hardly any light coming from it. And the closer you'll get to the sun, the less light your candle seems to be shining. So too, the Kabbalists explain is our relationship and our awareness of our own soul and its light. When I'm sitting in far from the source, then oh my God, it's so bright. Every step I take closer to the source is an oh my God moment of how more I need to be shining.
Right, how dim you are.
So it's actually, and I think it's really important for our listeners, the oh my God moments we're talking about are not an indication of regression. It's actually the greatest indication of progression.
So beautiful. And I think the way to do that is to really be curious about the things that come up in your day. Like we all have those moments where we hear something or somebody says something to us and it doesn't sit right or something stands out. We're not really sure what it means. Like I know I rewind things a lot, whether it's a conversation or something, a thought that I had in the day or an experience. And I always ask the Creator, what did that really mean? Or what am I supposed to understand from that? Or what am I supposed to see? Because I'm aware that I'm blind to some extent. We all are. And so by asking that question, I always get, the Creator always answers, always. Sometimes it takes a month and you have to ask the question every day for big things. Sometimes it's a few times in one day if it's smaller things. But if you are open and you really ask with the intention to spiritually see the purpose and to learn from it, you always get the clarity. And then from that, what happens is two things. You start to trust your essence, your soul, to give you kind of clues, right? That was like Monica internal saying, hey, something just happened there, pay attention to it. And then it connects you to your source. And then people talk about intuition and being able to see and hear, well, this is how it's done. It's not something that's only selected for the gifted people in that area. We all have the ability to get there and to be that.
Once again, Monica, an important, amazing point, but your soul is talking to you all the time. The Creator is talking to you all the time. But unless you're in the pursuit of the endless, unless you're in the pursuit of transformation, you're not going to stop to listen. You're not going to hear it.
Not going to ask questions. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah. It's really one of the most powerful tools I've discovered.
And I think that leads to an important understanding as well, that unless this is your life path, you're actually not going to be happy, because your soul's not going to be happy. Your soul is only going to be happy if it is in a body or in a being that is moving towards the endless, transformation, inspiration, change, oh my God moments. So while we've talked throughout this whole podcast that it's not about the body, but the reality is the body's not going to be happy, you're not going to be happy.
They speak to each other.
Exactly. The only way for true happiness and fulfillment is a constant push off the plateau. A constant push for transformation and change for the purpose, as we said in the beginning, of attaching our soul to its source, which is the only state within which it is happy.
What's beautiful is I really want our listeners to understand what the endless is. You never arrive somewhere, but what happens is being in the state, I want to call it the state of endless, means that there's actually no separation between body and soul and source. It's all one beautiful energy that goes through your life to support you and everybody that you come across. And then it doesn't matter when you end as you know it, you are endless because you're part of something that is eternal.
Beautiful.
If that's clear.
It's clear to me. So I'd like to share one of the emails we got recently from one of our listeners. It's a good time to remind our listeners, go to email Michael and Monica at spirituallyhungry.life. Your questions, inspirations, comments. We've been getting a lot of comments lately, which I really enjoy, but also topic ideas or questions that you have. We read all of them. We try to share as many of them with our listeners. It inspires them. So make sure if you're thinking about writing us, you write us. Again, as I said, it inspires us and inspires our listeners. So one of the emails. Hi, guys. I really listened to your podcast on how negative words can really influence people.
I really listened? I recently listened. What does it say?
Said I really listened.
Okay.
I think she meant she really listened to it.
Oh, I really listened.
Which I think very much related to the podcast we just did. She wasn't going through the motions. She was actually listening. How negative words can really influence people in such a way that can last a lifetime. I have so much trouble saying positive comments to my son, who is a gambling and drug-taking adult. It is very difficult when you are emotionally attached, and I try so hard to understand and be supportive, but too often succumb to anger and critical words. I feel I have tried everything possible to turn things around, but I know only he can make the changes necessary to achieve this. Your podcast has helped me try again to be kind and more understanding, so thank you both. By the way, I listened to an older podcast the other day when you were both being silly and was walking along with my headphones and crying with laughter.
I love it.
That makes us happy. I love you both and find you so real and inspirational. Sending you much love, Marsha.
You know, I received a letter recently about another parent who was having a hard time connecting to her child who has, some cognitive differences, and she hasn't gotten her tested, but there's some serious things going on. And her daughter's 8. And she said that through listening to the podcast and reading our books, and that she's able to now just see the beauty of her daughter instead of what she isn't.
I think in the next episode, maybe we'll read that letter.
Yeah, it's such really a beautiful letter. But I think just for our friend today, Marsha, that wrote in, I think it's just hard as a parent, unless we kind of clarify this in our minds, that to stop looking at them as what you think they should be. And of course, there's disappointment. There's no question. But we don't know why their souls came into the world. We don't know what the purpose is, and just to try to see the light in them. And I think sometimes by seeing that and believing in the possibility for that to shine brighter and brighter, you actually support that process to happen, because by judging them or speaking bad to them or about them keeps them small and doesn't really change any outcome.
Beautiful, beautiful. And that's actually an ancient Kabbalistic teaching that when we speak about somebody and they're negative, we actually make that more prevalent. And when we speak about their goodness, even if it's small, we actually allow it to expand.
Well, just a fun fact for our listeners, in my, you know this, I think when our oldest was going through, a difficult time during the stages of puberty and, they started acting out, I saved his name in my phone as David, my righteous son. And he was anything but righteous at that age, at 16, 17. And I just wanted, every time the phone rang, I wanted to see that. I saw it over and over and over again. And then I decided to make a name for all of our children in our phone, in my phone. And it really works.
Beautiful. Beautiful. So thank you, Marcia, for sharing with us. Thank you to all of our listeners who listen to us and send in your emails. Remember to send all of your comments, questions, stories, inspirations to Monica and Michael at spirituallyhungry.life. Go to Apple Podcast, write 5-star reviews, share this podcast with everybody you know. And as always, we hope you enjoyed listening to this podcast as much as we enjoyed recording it.
Stay spiritually hungry.